Good morning, everybody. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. There will be lots of networking time at coffee breaks and at lunch. So we're ready to really start our 29th ACI Europe Annual Assembly and Congress. My name is Philippos Sosilos, and I'm really honored, delighted to be your Master of Ceremonies for the next couple of days. I'm a partner at PwC, and I'm heading our consulting practice. So both transformation and sustainability are very close to my heart, and I'm also passionate about the combination, transform or die, but more about that later. What a lovely night we had last night at the welcome reception, at the stunning surroundings of the Kurion Ancient Theatre, courtesy of Hermes Airport. Perhaps a more appropriate way to thank Hermes Airport would be for all of us to stand up and do a little bit of a bird dance, but I think it's a bit too early in the morning, so let us do it the traditional way and give them a warm round of applause. It was truly remarkable to be in a place that was built more than 2,000 years ago and to actually watch a play that was even written 200 years earlier than when the theater actually was built. So just a few housekeeping points before we start. Don't worry about taking notes from the speaker presentations. All the presentations will be available immediately after the event. They will be sent to you by email. And if you have a Donald Trump urge and you want to tweet, you can tweet at any point in time using hashtag ACI Cyprus. Also, this is a good time to check if you have really switched off your mobile. We don't want to disturb anybody. And I would like to make a point about the Events app. I know you've read about it a lot and people at the reception desk mentioned it, but it's really useful and important that you do download the Event app. If you haven't done so, please do it at any point in time. You have trouble locating your personal PIN that is necessary for that. Our colleagues outside at the registration desk will be happy to help you. But it's important to have the app because other than having all this important information about the speakers and the agenda and transportation, logistics, we are also going to be using the app for feeding questions in a live way. So there is an icon for questions and answers function. At any time during any speech during the moderation sessions, please feed your questions through the app, and the moderator will be receiving them live on their iPad, and they will be using them as the flow of the conversation will unfold. Of course, if you prefer the more traditional way and you want to ask a question using a microphone, there will be time for that at the end of the sessions. So let's begin. Our theme is Transform or Die, Airports and the Sustainability Challenge, which reflects the societal acceptability challenge, of course, that aviation is facing in Europe. And to give our first welcome address, I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Vasiliki Anastasiadou, Minister of Transport, Communications and Works.
Dear friends, good morning. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you to the 29th ACI Europe Annual Assembly and Congress in Cyprus. I'm sure that this meeting will be useful and will provide us all with valuable information. Aviation is an industry of national strategic importance for the Republic of Cyprus. Being an island, air transport services are vital in order to connect us to the rest of the world. A safe, secure, and efficient aviation industry underpins a range of business, trade, and tourism activities that contribute significantly to the economic prosperity of the island. The Republic of Cyprus, as a member of the European Union, International Civil Aviation Organization and the European Civil Aviation Conference supports the ongoing efforts to address the actions that must be taken to meet the challenges posed by climate change and support the sustainable development of international air transport. Although currently overall connectivity has reached a sufficient level for most aviation markets, space is still available for improvement, not only by attracting new markets, but also by strengthening markets with great potential, such as Germany, France, Ireland, and Italy. In cooperation with Hermes Airports, the government of the Republic of Cyprus has adopted incentive schemes for airlines which have been successful in improving connectivity as well as the economic development of the country. Air transport in Cyprus has shown steady and continuous growth in recent years. Larnaca and Paphos international airports handled almost 11 million passengers in 2018. Contributing factors to this growth are the regulatory framework implemented within the European Union and the open skies policy implemented by the government of Cyprus in its relation to third countries. Recent examples are the concluded agreements with Egypt, Lebanon, Australia, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. Additionally, in our negotiations with third countries, we seek the inclusion of the standard clauses of the European Union, which allow for the designation by Cyprus of European airlines established in Cyprus to operate agreed routes. Cypriot air carriers contribute to the increase in the number of seats offered to Cyprus from the main tourist markets, as well as to the creation of new job opportunities. At the same time, we have to note that eligible European airlines have also been granted commercial rights from Cyprus on routes to and from third countries, such as Israel, Lebanon, Iran, Russia, Ukraine, Egypt, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. It must be noted, however, that the decision of launching flight programs resides with the airlines, which operate their fleet on an economic criteria basis. The air travel industry is now at a critical junction between sustainability and growth, and the issue of climate change is therefore of strategic importance to the aviation sector. The contribution of the EU is vital with regard to measures to combat emissions on a global scale, and it is imperative that discussions for any additional taxing in aviation must be carefully assessed. The economics of air connectivity are fragile and are subject to continuously changing market dynamics. For Cyprus, a peripheral EU member state, any additional costs to the price of air tickets will negatively impact connectivity, which is a major enabler to develop tourism. Furthermore, all European citizens need affordable ticket prices. However, Cypriots need it more than anyone else, as air transport is the only available mode for connection with other countries. It is therefore important to ensure the viability of international competition in the EU aviation sector, and at the same time, take into consideration the peculiarities of member states. At this point, I would like to congratulate Hermes Airports for their remarkable work in reducing the environmental impact and using resources in a sustainable manner. Larnaca and Paphos international airports have earned the ACI Level 3 Plus accreditation in recognition of both airports' exemplary work in managing and reducing their carbon dioxide emissions and engaging other stakeholders to do the same, as part of the global airport industry's response to the challenge of climate change. European skies and airports are becoming more congested, causing delays and cancellations, in particular during the peak seasons of the year. Whatever decisions are taken for the future of European air traffic management, the real commitment of the member states and all the stakeholders, including airports, must be a better performance. Without the engagement of all stakeholders, the vision of a single European sky that started 20 years ago will not be fully realized. Now is the time to act, to make the single European sky fit for the future. It is for these reasons that Cyprus welcomes the recent report of the Wise Persons Group on the single European sky. In the long term, more structural changes are required through new technologies and innovative air traffic management solutions, from definition, development, and deployment to operations based on CSR solutions and building on the reorganization of European airspace. Cyprus is working hard to cope with all the necessary changes. I am particularly pleased because, as I am informed, our Parliament is taking soon before the plenary for voting into law the bill concerning the establishment of a state-owned entity to provide air navigation services within the Nicosia FIR and at the airports of Larnaca and Paphos. This new entity will have the financial visibility and flexibility to effectively deliver the required contributions to the single European sky performance targets for the benefit of safety, capacity, cost efficiency, and the environment. Dear friends, may I once again take this opportunity to thank the ACI for its invitation to address this event. I wish you all every success over the next couple of days, and also hope that you'll find some time to enjoy our beautiful island and nice weather. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Anastasiadou.
You will be seeing the long version of this video this evening. We have more to show, but given the time constraints, we thought we'd give you a preview of what you will be seeing this evening at the gala dinner. Dear ministers, distinguished ACI colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Kalimera, good morning. I'm very pleased to welcome you all to Cyprus at the opening of the 29th ACI Europe Annual Assembly and Congress. It is a great honor and a real privilege for Hermes Airports to host this annual assembly, especially so as this is the first gathering of over 300 aviation professionals from 40 countries here in Cyprus. I would like to take this opportunity to thank ACI Europe for accepting our offer to host this conference, and also to thank the people of Hermes Airports, in particular our marketing department led by Maria Gouroupi, who have worked so hard over the past year to make this event a success. As for many of you, this would be your first visit to Cyprus. Allow me to give you a brief introduction to our country. Cyprus is situated at the crossroads of three continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa, and has 10,000 years of rich history and tradition influenced by its key geographical position. The first signs of human society in this key region date back to the 7th millennium BC, when on the hills of Hierogydia, only 20 kilometers away from here, the first Cypriots created a Neolithic settlement, which today is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, demonstrating Cyprus's significant role in the dispersal of culture from the Near East to the European world. These early prehistoric inhabitants were soon joined by the Mycenaean Greeks 3,500 years ago, who introduced the Greek language, which is still spoken today. Since then, almost a dozen other cultures have come through Cyprus, including the Phoenicians, Assyrians, Franks, Venetians, Ottomans, and British, all leaving behind visible traces of their time on the island, each defining to some extent who we are today through their positive influence on our culture, traditions, language, arts, cuisine, trade, and even our infrastructure. People say that Cyprus is an open-air museum spanning so many centuries and different eras. Examples of the impressive pieces of art on display are many, such as the Paphos mosaics, the Kourion Amphitheater, where we welcomed you last night, the world-famous Byzantine period churches, or the well-preserved Venetian walls of Nicosia from the Renaissance period. Cyprus has retained its multicultural character over the years, being the island where the apostles of Jesus Christ once walked, with many sites and Christian churches celebrating their presence here, and at the same time being home to the fourth most important holy place of worship for Muslims globally, the Hala Sultan Tekke, located near the Salt Lake, very close to Larnaca Airport. Since its independence in 1960, Cyprus has become a major tourist destination in the Mediterranean. This is not surprising, since the excellent weather conditions, the clear and sparkling sea waters, the welcoming people, the inviting food and wine, as well as the variety of monuments and cultural attractions, make our island very popular, turning the hospitality industry into one of the main pillars of the local economy, with a 14% contribution to the country's GDP. The growth of the tourism sector over the years has not been without its challenges, depending, as it does, on so many different factors, some of which are outside our control. In the last decade alone, growth has been punctuated by two downturns, but since 2013, both tourist numbers and revenues have been growing strongly and consistently, enabling the economy of Cyprus to recover from the local financial crisis of that year much earlier than anticipated. The importance of tourism has been recognized through the creation at the beginning of this year of a dedicated Ministry of Tourism assigned with the responsibility of implementing the National Tourism Strategy with a horizon to 2030. Of course, hand in hand with tourism development has been the improvement of air connectivity to the island, this being the major, I could even say sole, mode of transport to and from Cyprus, which is so important for both business to prosper as well as for the standard of living of the local population. Cyprus, as you can appreciate, is more than just a place for holidays. It is a modern, cosmopolitan society and a business center which is highly attractive as an investment destination, offering opportunities across a wide range of sectors. Over the past 6 years, it has received more than 10 billion of foreign direct investment, leveraging its competitive advantages, which include its tax system, legal framework, its geostrategic position, offering access to European and international destinations, its pool of high-caliber human talent, and the overall ease and low cost of doing business, combined with the high quality of life and the long tradition of hospitality. Cyprus, admittedly, makes an ideal place to start and scale a company. To facilitate tourism and business development, the need and importance of modern airports built and operated to the highest international standards was recognized early on, and in 2002, an international tender competition was invited, leading to a concession agreement which involved the construction of new terminals and associated infrastructure and their operation for 25 years before being handed back to the government. The tender was won by Hermes Airports, a company established in Cyprus with 9 international and Cypriot shareholders, all with expertise in the areas of airport construction, operation, and management. The concession agreement was signed in 2006, and with an investment of 640 million euro, all privately funded, the 2 new terminals were completed in 2008 in Paphos and 2009 in Larnaca. The concession was the first and biggest ever undertaken in the Republic of Cyprus. It has paved the way for other public-private partnerships and has won a number of awards, including Best Transport Project in Europe by World Finance Magazine in 2013. Ladies and gentlemen, in ancient Greek mythology, god Hermes was the protector and patron of travelers and the celestial messenger, a man with wings on his ankles, making him able to fly. Sharing the same name, our company aims to develop the country's aviation sector more than ever before, taking advantage of Cyprus's strategic position and offering new opportunities to travelers and traders alike, as god Hermes would have done. Our success in terms of developing the aviation business is evident, considering that since 2006, passenger numbers have increased by more than 60%, from 6.7 to 11 million, despite the occasional adverse market conditions, and today Cyprus is served by 70 airlines operating to 120 destinations in 40 countries. Growth has been diversified, coming from a number of different countries across all airline models and customer segments. As vital gateways to the country and an integral part of the economy, our airport's operation supports 18,000 jobs on the island and contributes 4% to the country's GDP. In our efforts for further development, we are working closely with the government and other tourism stakeholders with a view to building demand and jointly showcasing the abundance of Cyprus experiences. Our plans for the future focus on pursuing further growth of traffic and promoting year-round connectivity to the island. Over a decade after building the new terminals, we continuously strive to make our airports even better in terms of providing new and upgraded services and redesigning our operations in order to satisfy the changing needs of a wide spectrum of passengers, always aiming to offer an exceptional traveling experience. The redesign of the commercial areas of Larnaca Airport, which is currently underway, is an example of our efforts to offer our passengers an exciting journey through the airport, encouraging exploration of the shopping and dining opportunities. Emphasis is placed on sense-of-place elements in the design so that passengers can enjoy the warmth of Cypriot hospitality throughout their journey in the airport. Philoxenia, Greek for hospitality, is key for us, which is why through the launch of the Hermes Academy to the community, we aim to offer a high level of service based on Cypriot traditional values to all our customers. I'm not intending to talk about all the works we are undertaking, there are too many, although I have to say we're particularly proud of the work we do in the accessibility area, for which both our airports have won ACI awards. I would also like to mention that we are in the process of securing licenses for the construction of 2 solar plants to be completed by the end of the year at each airport, which will generate between 25% and 30% of our energy requirements, significantly reducing our impact on the environment. Further evidence of the importance we assign is that earlier this month we have acquired the AC Level 3+ neutrality carbon accreditation. Dear friends and colleagues, I personally think it is a unique privilege to be able to work in the airport business, where what we do impacts so many lives, both directly and indirectly, because our airports are so closely related with our island countries' tourism sector. The people of Hermes, which make a wonderful team, are dedicated to delivering our vision of operating best-in-class airports with a unique Cypriot sense of place, which will ultimately be our legacy. I would like now to say a few words about our event's well-inspired theme, Transform or Die, Airports and the Sustainability Challenge. Sustainable development is defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. I find it particularly fitting that a discussion on sustainability is taking place in a country with a 12,000-year history where we know all too well the importance of leaving our world in a better place than where we found it for the benefit of those that follow us. We are very happy that ACI's comprehensive sustainability strategy for the airport industry will be launched here in Cyprus during the conference. Sustainable development has become increasingly important in light of the threats we are faced with due to climate change and environmental damage. Our airports, like other companies in other sectors, need to take their own individual business characteristics into account and develop in such a way as to mitigate in the process the burden their own operation is imposing on the surrounding ecosystem. We look forward to these 2 days, during which we will share new ideas, best practices, knowledge and expertise coming from around the world. In conclusion, I would like to welcome you again to Cyprus, wish you an interesting and enjoyable conference, and encourage you to stay and visit our island, exploring beyond the hosting city of Limassol. Cyprus offers a mix of diverse experiences, all easily accessible to address all tastes. Whether you like art, history, outdoors activities, sports, or cultural activities, the sea or the mountains, you will not be disappointed. And of course, no one should leave without tasting the famous Cyprus cuisine and wine, reflecting a mix of different cultures that once lived on the island, edited by our local chefs. I look forward to toasting you at tonight's gala dinner with our Kumandaria wine, the oldest named wine in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleni. Eleni, as a Cypriot, I can say that you have represented us very well. You have done an excellent job in bringing to life Cyprus's past, present, but also our hope for a sustainable future as well. So we move forward now with the State of the Industry address, which will be delivered by the very familiar to all of you, ACI Europe Director General Olivier Jagovec. Olivier, this stage may not be as grand as the ancient theater of Kurion last night, but in any case, this floor is yours.
Thank you, Filippo. Thank you, Filippo. Dear ministers, members, friends, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and a very warm welcome to Cyprus. Καλώς ορίσατε στην πολύ ωραία Κύπρο, as it's fitting to say. And with that, of course, I'd like to thank very much Eleni and her team, and the one and only Maria, and all Hermes for their hospitality. I think those of you who were with us last night, I'm sure you find it really, truly special. And personally, I was quite amazed to realize how what Aristophanes wrote more than 2,000 years ago is still very relevant to our modern times. Before I take you through to the state of our industry, I'd like to thank our sponsors and world business partners, Dufry, Sita, Amadeus, Innovative Travel Solutions, thank you very much for your support, because clearly without you we wouldn't be able to stage this event. Now let's dive straight, not into the blue waters that are nearby, but into the dynamics of our industry and set the scene for the next 2 days, the sessions we'll have. Starting, of course, where we stand as airports today in Europe. And I think it's fair to recognize that the past years have been pretty good. Starting with traffic, of course, it's been quite a story of growth, as you can see. Last year we grew 6.1% in passenger numbers, on top of the preceding years 8.5%, on top of 3 years where we had in excess of 5%. It's quite amazing. So overall last year you welcomed more than 2.3 billion passengers across your doors. That was an absolute record. And if you look at the past 5 years, the growth has been 36% in passenger numbers, which means that Europe's airports have accommodated an additional 630 million passengers in the past 5 years. So of course managing that growth is not easy, and I think it does put a lot of pressure on your staff, on your facilities. And indeed for some in particular, we call them the fast and the furious, the growth has been amazing. You can see it, airports from all over Europe, airports of different size, posting really very impressive figures. Now with traffic, of course, the financials are also very important, and they are quite solid for the industry at the moment, although not for all airports. Our return on invested capital is standing at close to 8%, which is pretty good. But having said that, European airports are underperforming in terms of profitability when you compare them to their peers in other parts of the world, especially in emerging markets. And although airlines wouldn't like us to say that, the reality is also that our profitability underperforms that of airlines, especially if you look at the big guys. As you can see, if we look at the profitability of the top 5 airline groups in Europe and compare it to the profitability of the top 5 airport groups that operate their main hubs, the gap is quite substantial. Now, overall, it's not good for all airports. 55% is the percentage of loss-making airports still in Europe. That has to do with investment cycles, of course, but it has to do with the fact also that for smaller regional airports, profitability is really a struggle. Indeed, in our industry, size does matter greatly. You can see it for airports with less than 1 million passengers, 71% of them are loss-making, and that figure has not changed much over the past years. Overall, if we look at what is driving our improved financial, it's been very much about cost reduction and not so much about revenue growth. Why? Because actually the traffic growth no longer comes with the same kind of revenue profile we were used to have. So indeed, there's been a lot of cost trimming in the industry on the operational side, and of course on the CapEx side, airports have benefited from the very low interest rates environment to finance their investment. But moving forward, we're a bit worried on the cost side. First, because there's only so much you can press the lemon. You've seen the figures, the reduction on the OPEX. Continuously going with reducing costs like that is going to be more difficult. Also because we're facing renewed cost to deploy new security screening technologies, in particular for hold baggage by 2022, to the tune of 15 billion euro that we have to invest. But also because we see increasingly European states offloading their financial responsibility onto airports to pay for technology that facilitates border control, although that should be their responsibility. And of course, because we're going to need to invest to face the capacity crunch that Europe is having ahead of it. If we look at the top 50 European airports over the next 5 years, they are planning to spend an impressive 43.3 billion euro. Looking now at the outlook for this year, 2019, clearly we see traffic softening. I mean, it's still growing nicely for passengers, although as you can see, non-EU airports are not growing so much. That reflects, of course, the economic recession in Turkey, but also the bankruptcy of WOW. And we have negative freight figures. Actually, freight figures have been negative for 7 months now. In April, I think it was the worst monthly performance in 7 years for freight. And that tells us that we're facing a fading momentum, with clearly the global economy going down, with volatile oil prices and currencies, with ATM disruptions taking their toll, and of course with overcapacity generally in the European market. All this comes with, of course, geopolitical instability. We have trade wars, we have the risk of conflict, we have difficult political situation in some countries, and of course, we have Brexit. So against that background, it's not surprising that we're seeing airlines being much more risk averse and very much focused on protecting their yields. And that means indeed that if you look at the European market, intra-European market, the growth in seat capacity this summer is not very impressive. And with it, of course, comes weaker growth in direct connectivity. As you know, as ACI, we measure the connectivity of our airports. And you can see this year, direct connectivity is growing by just 1.2%. And that's quite a gap compared to the passenger traffic. Of course, this is about airlines being much more cautious in developing new routes, entering new markets. But it is also about, of course, airline bankruptcies that we've had. And of course, the fact that we do have significant capacity limitation at many airports. So beyond 2019, what do we see in terms of the main market dynamics and business drivers that will continue to shape the airport industry? On the positive side, we see continued strong demand and connectivity fundamentals. And I think clearly those fundamentals explain in great part the traffic performance we've had over the past years. It's about experiential consumption that is very good for any business associated with travel and leisure. It's about the millennials who treat aviation as a commodity. It's about the grey economy, the baby boomers retiring, being affluent and very mobile. It's of course about the global middle class in emerging market expanding, and those people want to come and enjoy Europe. And last but not least, it's about also new aircraft technology that is pushing further the boundaries of air connectivity. So all these factors are, of course, very, very positive. But at the same time, the main market dynamics we're seeing in Europe for airports is the rise of airport competition. And there are clearly 4 drivers behind that. The first one is airline hybridization. The low-cost carriers have moved up market very successfully. They're feeding and connecting, and they continue to drive traffic growth, and they continue to drive increase in direct connectivity. As you can see over the past 10 years, actually, low-cost carriers are the one that delivered increases in direct connectivity. Full-service carriers have retrenched their level of direct connectivity. And of course, hybridization is for full-service carriers about embracing the low-cost model. The second factor of airport competition is airline consolidation. Many developments over the past 2 years in Europe. And as the competition commissioner says in Brussels, airports are becoming the battleground for airline dominance. The third factor is ambitious non-European airlines who continue to invest into Europe. This is airline capacity seats for this summer. As you can see, lots of capacity added by Turkish Airlines, the Gulf carriers, Chinese airlines, US airlines. And of course, this means that Europe's airports compete to attract those services not only between themselves, but with airports beyond Europe. And the fourth factor, of course, is one I mentioned already, new aircraft technology that allows airlines to consider new markets, and that also puts airport competition to a new level. So the impact of all that is quite clear, and I think you all feel it. Airport competition is on the rise. And that means that with it, we see the rise of direct connectivity and point-to-point services. I think it's quite interesting that if you look at the last 5 years, where the growth has taken place, you realize that a lot of the growth in passenger numbers took place in the wider middle of the market, and that the very large airport and the very small airports significantly underperformed. So what this means is phenomenon of hub bypass and new long-haul connectivity, some examples of the routes that have been announced or launched this year. And indeed, the hub market is becoming very competitive. First, on a global level, we see hub competition increasing and diversifying. The opening of the new Istanbul airport is, of course, part of that story. But beyond Istanbul and beyond the usual suspects in the Gulf, what we're seeing very clearly is that across emerging countries, across the globe, we see many airports growing over the past 10 years, their hub connectivity very aggressively, and providing fresh competition to our European hubs. Of course, the hub market is not static in Europe either. There too, competition is expanding. It's expanding because of niche and smaller hubs, who you can see have been growing their hub connectivity quite relentlessly. And also now with what we call low-cost or self-connectors hubs, which are entering the hub market. Of course, they're starting from a very low base, but as you can see, they're also growing their hub connectivity. That's London Gatwick, Nice, who just announced an initiative to develop hub connectivity, or Porto, Charleroi, and Bergamo. So clearly, what we think is that airlines are getting a pretty good deal out of all this. And of course, here, the dice is not moving forward, it's moving backwards. There's one figure that illustrates that very well, is the fact that if you take all our aeronautical revenues together, the charges paid by airline and passengers, that leaves us on an annual basis with a 12 billion of unrecovered costs to run our facilities. Or put it in a different way, those aeronautical revenues only cover 80% of our operating costs at an industry level. Yet, we continue to see airlines often opposing investment in new capacity. This is something we're hearing more and more these days. It is coming all over again in consultation on airport charges, because of course, charges is linked to investment, but it's also linked to competitive dynamics, or maybe I should rather say uncompetitive dynamics, because indeed, airport capacity constraints leads to less airline competition, and in turn that allows airlines to protect their yields and to charge higher fares. We know, and it is a fact, that where there is airport congestions, the fares paid by passengers are higher than at those airports when there's no congestion. Regulation plays its role there because, of course, it gives to airlines scarcity rents in relation to slots. And what we find very often is that regulation tends to actually incentivize conflict between airports and airlines rather than commercial dynamics. Of course, we also face competitive pressures on our commercial revenues. Since 2013, the spend per passenger is going down at European airports on our commercial revenues in all categories except food and beverage and rental cars. However, food and beverage and rental cars, you can see, are a rather small share of our total commercial revenues. That's linked to digital competition, that's linked to changing consumer behaviors that I mentioned earlier, but that's also about the fact that, in fact, a lot of the growth is coming from frequent flyers. So when you're a frequent flyer, there's only so many bottles of perfume you're going to buy in a year at the airport, unfortunately. But there too, we have airline cabin bag limitations that does not necessarily help us grow the commercial revenues. And we have also a range of increasing domestic regulations that don't help, like labeling requirements for confectionery and alcohol. Of course, the main business driver that we see overall is digitalization and technology. This is about datification and artificial intelligence that is challenging all our operational process and forces to innovate. And it comes with automation, of course, chatbot robots, and what people call the next frontier of air transport, which is UAS. So clearly, all these market dynamics are putting airport on their toes. They're really challenging our modus operandi, and they lead us to consider a number of strategic directions. The first one is, of course, about proactive route and network developments. I think it was very clear from Eleni's speech. Route development has moved from inward business development to outward market development based on extensive local partnerships well beyond the tourism authorities and clearly enabled by market intelligence and research. Offering competitive airport charges and diversifying the airline portfolio is, of course, part of that. And we do live in the era of incentive of rebates. At our last count, 98% of Europe's airports are offering incentive and rebates to airlines. And interestingly, we're also seeing more bilateral contracts which reflect commercial dynamics and which hopefully should lead towards a normalization of our relationship with airlines. We're not yet there, but this is where we should be going. Operational efficiency, that's also important. The competitive position of an airport is not just about airport charges, it's also about operational efficiency. This is about sweating our assets. This is what our shareholders want us to do. But clearly, ATM disruptions stand in the way. and I cannot agree more with the Minister that really for European governments it is time to act. We've been waiting 20 years for the single European sky. I think we're fed up of waiting together with the airlines. And indeed, what we want is to get as airports better integrated in the ATM system, because that's key to generate more efficiency, and that means going beyond ACDM into concepts like the ground coordinator or total airport management. And that's why we're very much involved and very supportive as well of César, both on the research side and on the deployment side. Investing cost efficiently, that's the fourth strategic direction. The airport is never complete. I think that's a quote that could be attributed to any forward-looking airport manager. And indeed, you keep investing in capacity and quality. And increasingly, I think we're going to have to invest more in sustainability, and I'll come back to that. Enhancing quality, that's linked to investment. Why is it important? Because quality is directly linked to our ability to generate commercial revenues. We know that for every 1% increase in passenger satisfaction, there is a 1.5% increase in our commercial revenues. To increase quality, of course, again, it's all about digitalization, embracing it, airside, landside, but also thinking beyond the traditional remits and physical boundaries of the airport. So harnessing data, artificial intelligence, this really should allow us to put the passengers at the heart of our processes by engaging with the passengers in new and diversified ways to tailor-make the airport experience more, and ultimately also to try to align more our operational stakeholders so that we can be more in control of the way our facilities are used. Again, this is about sweating our assets. There, clearly, that means that we're seeing now airports across Europe placing innovation at the very heart of their corporate culture. We have many airports running innovation labs, and as ACI, we also try to support that. We will actually run an hackathon together with César, which will be hosted by Athens Airport in December. That's going to be quite an exciting exercise. Ultimately, I think the promise of digitalization is to merge commercial development and earth services development around the broader concept of the total value of the passenger. And clearly, this is where we see potential for cooperation with airlines so that we can finally grow the pie together rather than keep fighting for the pie. Of course, this is a chapter that still needs to be written for most of it, but we're hopeful. And finally, I think another strategic direction of airports, which is really interesting and which, in my view, doesn't get enough attention, is international expansion. We have a number of great airport operators across Europe that are investing and managing airports overseas. This is about exporting the European airport business model, exporting their know-how. This is about growing their business by diversifying risk. And I think it's quite interesting to note that collectively, those airport groups generated last year close to 3.2 billion in revenues from those overseas operations. And clearly, this is something that we think needs to be supported and encouraged also by the European Union, because ultimately, those airport companies are great European champions. So clearly, these strategic directions, they've come to redefine and illustrate the complexity of our business, which keeps increasing all the time. It's fast-changing competitive dynamics, and overall, I think, the entrepreneurship that is now driving airports across Europe. But as we continue to work on those strategic directions, clearly we're facing now much more uncertainty. And that uncertainty is linked to new and unprecedented disruptive forces that are reshaping potentially our economies and beyond that, our societies. And I think clearly these disruptive forces raise many questions about the future of air connectivity and the future of aviation. And I must say that for now, we don't have the answers to those questions. This is about, of course, the new globalization model. Global trade has been receding for 10 years now, after 4 decades of uninterrupted expansion. It doesn't mean globalization is going in recess. Globalization is simply adapting. It is changing its pace, changing its shape, and indeed it's digitalization today that is driving globalization. And that gives us Industry 4.0, which also comes with renewed protectionism and risk of fragmentation. And ultimately, the risk there is that we're moving into lower GDP growth on a lasting basis. This is what we've gone through already to some extent, and the risk of secular stagnation. So there again, the question is how this transformation will impact the level of demand for air travel and the shape of air connectivity. Again, we don't have the questions yet. And of course, the other major disruption is the climate emergency. The UN IPCC report last October sent warning bells across the world. It tells us that if we want to avoid going above 1.5 degrees in global warming, we need drastic and urgent action on an unprecedented scale. Otherwise, the catastrophe will be upon us. So clearly, both the climate emergency and the new globalization model are giving rise to fast-changing societal values and politics. And I think Greta Thunberg really personifies those changing societal values. With it, we see the rise of public activism, new form of communities which are challenging the established process of democratic engagement. We see new concepts, life cycle management, circular economy, the consumer as preservers. And that means that as businesses, we need to react. And I think we need not only to respond, we need corporate activism to some extent. Because ultimately, citizens, governments, and increasingly, I think also investors, expect businesses to deliver not just financial returns, but to contribute more to society. So clearly, we're moving from CSR to ESG and SRI, and there are going to be 3 principles that are going to be key for any business. It's purpose, inclusion, and sustainability. I think clearly those principles will be linked to an ability of business to earn its license to keep operating in the future. Otherwise, it's clear that policymakers and regulators will force change upon us. They might even punish those businesses which don't move fast enough. This is all relevant, of course, for aviation today, because as has been mentioned, aviation is a major contributor to climate change. And indeed, in a matter of months, I think we've gone from the positives of being associated with personal fulfillment and freedom to the negatives of being perceived as damaging the climate, the planet. So clearly we need to react because we are facing today a societal acceptability challenge, which is about our reputation. But beyond that, it's about our social and business mandate. It's about our future growth prospect. It's about our returns, our ability to access capital, both human and financial. So that requires a business transformation imperative from aviation in general. And for airports, that means that we need to move from B2B to B2C, which we've done already, to the next step, which is B2P, business to people. This transformation is something I had outlined already last year, this event in Brussels. And since then, we have worked very hard at ACI Europe together with you, our members, to chart the way forward and to provide you guidance on how airports can move towards more sustainable airport operations. And this is why today we are launching our sustainability strategy. Our president will tell you more about this strategy in a minute. It's very comprehensive. And at the same time, as part of the strategy, we're also committing the European airport industry to achieve net zero CO2 emission by 2050. I'd like here to thank very much the board of ACI Europe for its leadership, for pushing us in that direction. It's been an interesting 12 months to get there, I must say. But clearly, it's what we need to do, because it's not just about future-proofing your business, our business. It's also about future generation, and that matters greatly, clearly. And ultimately, this is going to be our contribution to make sure that air connectivity remains part of modern society. I thank you very much. And now it's a great pleasure for me to introduce our president, Dr. Michael Kerklo from Munich Airport. Michael has been my boss for 2 years. I'm still smiling. He's still smiling, so it's good. He's ending his term as president pretty soon at the end of this annual Congress, and I'd really like to thank him for his support. He's a man who believes in collective action, in association. He was believing that before he was our president, but clearly he's into it, and we're going to miss him. Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Well, I'm still there one day. Yeah. Well, that was another excellent speech by Olivier. I mean, this is always one of the highlights of our conferences, and I'm, again, very much impressed by what you've put together here. It's really fantastic, and that's, I mean, the state of the industry as it is. So, dear Minister, ladies and gentlemen, friends of ACI, partners, business partners of ACI, members of ACI, good morning, Kalimera, welcome to Cyprus. Again, I'd like to thank Eleni and her team. Maria, I don't know, I haven't seen her, she must be somewhere, organize something, but she did a fantastic job to, in the end, prepare the hosting of our annual Congress. And of course, we are very delighted to be here in this magnificent setting. Well, also we choose Cyprus as a location for our annual gathering a while ago. The past months have somehow confirmed the pertinence of that choice. Indeed, as aviation in Europe is now facing what Olivier rightly called the challenge of societal acceptability, there can be no questioning of the tremendous value of air connectivity for Cyprus. The Minister touched upon that, and Eleni as well. And that's not just in economic and social terms, as you've heard from Minister Anastasiadou, but also in geopolitical terms. The situation of Cyprus, alongside that of other European countries that sit at the periphery of Europe, or which heavily depend on tourism and leisure industries, illustrates the difficulties and complexities involved in addressing the impact of aviation on global warming. But that situation also points to the risks of not moving forward in addressing the climate emergency we are facing now. This is something humanity cannot afford. Governments across Europe and the European Union are wrestling with this unprecedented challenge. Others beyond Europe are not for now, but will in future, I'm sure. The latest scientific evidence is beyond dispute, and European voters, especially younger ones, have sent a clear message. They want the kind of decisive action that the UN IPCC is calling for, and rightly so. This means that sustainability and climate action are now rising to the very top of the European airports agenda. For now, when it comes to aviation, the approach is mostly punitive, curbing demand through taxation. Taxation is indeed seen as an easy way out of the problem, with considerable side benefits for finance ministers, but taxation would do nothing to actually decarbonize aviation, unless, of course, the proceeds are strictly earmarked for that purpose. But I have not heard a lot of people talking about that. Most people would continue flying, with the exception of those with lower incomes. Ultimately, taxing aviation will hurt less affluent people, especially in places like, for example, Cyprus. All this means that the aviation sector needs to up its game through collective action. This is precisely what Europe's airports are doing today. Our comprehensive sustainability strategy that we are launching today is the tool that will allow airports to put their societal purpose at the core of their business strategy, and thus embrace the new business-to-people paradigm. It is focused on environmental, social, and economic impacts, and addresses issues such as climate change, air quality, and resources management to values like human rights, employee experience, quality of life of local communities, and the sustainability of supply chains. By scoping what sustainability involves, identifying pathways, metrics, and enablers, the strategy provides concrete guidance to airports to establish and develop their own sustainability strategy. And it is, of course, based on the UN Sustainability Development Goals and the Global Reporting Initiative. And the key feature, in my view, is that it also pushes airports to go beyond their traditional remits and take the lead locally with their stakeholders, acting as role models. And I'm also very excited by the next phase of this project. We will start next month testing the implementation of our new strategy with a series of pilots. You might remember that we committed to that strategy a year ago at our annual assembly in Brussels, but delivering the strategy has been quite a feat. And I would like to thank all of the airports that contributed to the project. Their names are appearing now on the screen behind me. I would also like to praise here the work of our Head of Sustainability, Marina Belinsky, who has driven that project in full force. She really deserves a round of applause. Where is she? There she is. Thank you very much. The most important part of our sustainability strategy, our commitment to achieve net zero carbon for our own emissions by 2050 at the latest. That's really extremely important. By doing this, Europe's airports are aligning themselves with the Paris Agreement. Doing this has become an absolute must for any industry to remain relevant. Alongside our industry commitment, 193 airports operated by 39 members of ACI Europe are individually and formally committing by the same goal. 3 of them have actually already achieved net zero carbon emissions, which means that it is without offsetting, but with the possibility of carbon capture. These are Swedavia airports, by the way. Those airports are Ronneby, Luleå, and Visby. So, to paraphrase someone who was not short of leadership, yes, we can. Beyond airports, I'm convinced that the aviation sector needs to chart a vision and ambition towards net zero carbon emissions. Carbon neutral growth through CORSIA is an important and urgent step forward, but it needs to be supplemented. Of course, I'm well aware that eliminating carbon emissions from aircraft operations is a very daunting challenge, and that significant technological and financial barriers will need to be overcome. But setting that level of ambition for the long term, beyond 2050, is what needs to be done if we want to stand a chance to address the challenge of maintaining our societal acceptance. ACI Europe is ready to engage with our industry partners in Europe and globally through ATTAC, the Air Transport Action Group. This will require also action from governments and air navigation service partners. I find it quite incredible, that was mentioned earlier, that governments consider taxing aviation to reduce its carbon footprint without having delivered on the single European sky. And the environmental efficiencies in air traffic management, which were promised, were also not delivered. If they had done the job, aviation's CO2 emissions would be more than 5% lower than what they are today. Worse, the measures that now need to be taken to mitigate the ATM disruptions which we experienced last year, caused by understaffing and continued strikes with some air navigation service providers will actually result in even less efficient trajectories and more emissions. It seems the climate is yet not an emergency for all. And that needs to change. Maybe it is time that NGOs, environmental activists, also look at those responsible. As sustainability and climate action are set to become the top priority for aviation policy in Europe, we expect this to influence many other pending regulatory initiatives at the EU level. Airport slots, of course, should be one. While we are very pleased with the new governance rules agreed between IATA and ACI World for worldwide scheduling guidelines, it is clear that changes to the current EU regulations are needed to achieve more efficient and sustainable operations. Similarly, the review of the EU Airport Charges Directive and of the Aviation State Aid Guidelines will need to align with the focus on sustainability and the climate emergency. I'm talking about the user pays principle for charges and also about the fact that airports will face increasing operating costs and capital expenditure to become more sustainable and achieve their net zero carbon emissions target. Finally, I could not end without saying a few words on drones. Given the severe disruptions we have experienced over the past months at Gatwick and Heathrow, and the recent threats from the Extinction Rebellion movement in the UK. You see, even drones are linked to sustainability. We are now seeing increased regulatory activity on that front led by EASA, which is what we have been calling for. What we need and are waiting for is clear rules on the creation of no drone zones around airports, on who is responsible for what in terms of surveillance, detection, deterrence, and neutralization of non-cooperative drones. We accept that this may differ from one country or airport to another. What is important is that everyone knows what is their job and what is not their job. At the same time, we also need clarity on what technologies may be used safely for detecting and stopping drones and ensuring that they may be deployed on a risk-based basis. And ultimately, it is essential that the airports are at the forefront of the response to the drone threat and are trusted to have a central role in developing the appropriate solutions. This has been the case so far, and we trust that this good cooperation with regulators and other industry bodies will continue. Now, as you may know, I will step down as President of ACI Europe at the end of this conference, but also from my role as CEO of Munich Airport later on this year, maybe to spend more time playing piano. I don't know yet. We'll see. I consider it being a privilege to have spent my career working in aviation, the value it brings, the diverse range of people and talents it employs, its ever-present capacity for change, and the many magnificent people I met. There's a lot more change coming, a lot more to do, and I'm proud to see you, Europe's airports, driving that change as well. So let me just say this, keep going. Now, in closing, I would like to mark this moment of our airport industry commitment to net zero carbon emissions. And for that, I will show you first a short video message we have just received from the Deputy Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC. And after that video, I would like representatives from all our airports that have individually signed up to our commitment to join me on stage for a big, good photo. Thanks very much for your attention. See the video.
Greetings to all from the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat here in Bonn, to everyone at the 29th ACI Europe Annual General Congress and General Assembly. As you know, that ACI and our organization, United Nations Climate Change, have since 2015 worked together under an MOU to encourage airports to move towards climate neutrality. Our cooperation has centered on ACI's Airport Carbon Accreditation program, which we support through communication, joint events, and by United Nations Climate Change participating on the program's advisory board. Some of you will note that the start of our MOU was in the same year that the countries of the world, all of them, pledged in Paris to have the Paris Agreement, to conclude the Paris Agreement. And that was to limit average global temperatures rise to 1.5 degrees. The science tells us that to meet this target, the world must reach climate neutrality by mid-century. We also know the aviation sector has significant work ahead of it. Breakthrough technologies for airport transport will require significant research and development in the medium to long term. However, the climate emergency can only be addressed if we all work on making necessary changes to happen, and that is to make it happen now. It is as much about incremental gains from changes to day-to-day processes as it is about the shift to radical new technologies. ACI recognizes this and is responding with airports going carbon neutral seemingly every month, which is excellent. It is a reminder to all about the need for action to address climate change, and an encouraging reminder as well that progress is possible and is being made. Now, ACI Europe has upped its commitment with a hard target to get all of its airports climate neutral by 2050. The IPCC special report from last October is unequivocal about the need to achieve net zero by mid-century. It is heartening and so very commendable to see an industry as complex and as indispensable as the airport industry voluntarily raising its ambitions accordingly. We welcome this commitment, and we wish to recognize ACI as an excellent example for other sectors to follow. And of course, we encourage all airports to join the accreditation program. You'll be taking practical steps to address climate change, serving as an example of bold and steadfast commitments to present and future generations. And you can help spread a vital message of climate action to the millions and millions of people who pass through your airports each year. I commend you once again for your commitment and action on climate change, and wish you a productive and an enjoyable Congress and Assembly. All the very best to you.
So come on up on stage, everybody who represents an airport. We have 139 already signed, 39 I think at least should be on
We're not done yet. One more? Yeah? You can have this flat. We have that, like, just put it down a bit. Down a little bit. Down a little bit. Okay. And how's that? That okay?
'Cause you're a sky full of stars. I'm gonna give you my heart. 'Cause you're a sky.
Thank you very much, everybody. If you are the CEO of an airport that has agreed to sign the commitment, then please make sure that you sign the giant resolution in the exhibition area during the coffee break now. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah. Sorry.
What I would need is the president's speech.